Our mission is threefold: to provide students with academic excellence with integrity, building a global perspective, and creating opportunities for leadership and civic engagement. The picture to the right is right outside my office. My office is on College Avenue, the main thoroughfare through campus. And so honors education is held in high esteem at Penn State. It's given a great location on campus and has access to the president quite regularly. Some fast facts about the college. It was founded in 1997 by a naming gift from the Schreier family. Bill Schreier was a CEO of Merrill Lynch. And I just got to meet the current president of Merrill Lynch yesterday, Andy Sieg. We have about 2,000 students. The number fluctuates a little bit from all campuses across the state of Pennsylvania, the Commonwealth. And we have the luxury and enjoy having a large contingent of professionals, 28 staff members. There's one slide can't do justice to sort of what we do for our students, but we do have a thesis requirement. And we have one thing I'll point out is an emerging ethics program with ethics embedded throughout. Some fast facts down in the lower part, you see some numbers about residents in Pennsylvania, out of state, a decent number of out-of-state students, a decent number of international students. It's kind of small to see if you have a small screen, but our honor students come from all different disciplines. There does tend to be a little bit of an emphasis on STEM. So gray on this chart is engineering and purple is the sciences. That brings the total of those two to about 45%. Outside of that, a good contingent from the business school, from liberal arts, where Dr. Iqbal comes from. Just a great set of, we really love our honor students, as I'm sure you do at your campus. A full 40% go to grad school, either master's or PhD programs, and others go directly into the workforce. So we're here to talk a little bit about strategic planning. And I've brought along James Celentano from Entergain to help me with this, because he's been my partner in doing strategic planning in the most recent implementation, which is not at Schreier yet. We're just getting into it at Schreier, anyways, this is meant to be sort of nuts and bolts of strategic planning with a little bit of theory thrown in. So I've already mentioned about a little bit about myself, and thanks to JD for that introduction. I will mention that I was an honors student at Penn State. The college got named about 25 years ago, but honors education started in 1980, and I was an 80s student and loved my thesis, and that launched my career. So after going all around the country, I came back to be the dean at the college where I was a student, which is really enjoyable. James Celentano has an MBA and is co-founder of an organization that does all sorts of strategy things. It's called Entergain. And he was previously in higher ed as an adjunct professor on the music business world at NYU Steinert master's program. So I'll turn it over to James to say a few words.
Great. Hi, everybody. Thanks. It's an honor to be here. Really excited to talk to you about some of the tools and process that we go through to really engage everybody, all stakeholders in the strategic planning process. And so we'll start with a quote. Plans are worthless, but planning is everything. I'll take it. It's Eisenhower. The point is, and you'll see it's a theme in the models that we use, we like to get everybody involved. There's value in getting everybody involved. There's value in the process that you go through that helps build engagement and come out with a better plan and something that people are on board with along the way. But I'd like to start with some one-word introductions to just get a sense of who's on the call. So you can just use the Zoom chat for this. It's probably the most, the fastest way for us all to say hi to one another. So go into the Zoom chat and give us your name, the school or college you're involved with, what your role is there. But most importantly, give us one word on the feeling you get when you hear the phrase strategic planning, the feeling you get when you hear the phrase strategic planning. So go ahead and put that in the Zoom chat. And energy, oh good, focus, or they're coming fast, excited. All right, mixed emotions, I missed that one, sorry, yep. Possibilities, tired, vision is great, okay, good. So we're kind of, there's feelings on both sides of this, right? It's a lot of work, it's emotional work, necessary, but it's necessary work. That's terrific. Thank you.
And I've felt all of those emotions, and I've done multiple strategic plans. And I do believe what James said, it's all about the plan. As I look back on the different strategic plans I've been part of, it's probably been 5 or 6 of them, whether leading them or participating in them. It's the relationships that are strengthened, bolstered, the ideas that come out, the community that comes out, that is really the main benefit of doing the whole work. So following these intros we want to go into the why, sort of the benefits of a plan. Sometimes it's just because you're told to do one. At Penn State, we have to have one. Your institution, you probably have to have one. So that's one of the whys, but there are some others. The tools in the toolbox, James and I have developed and utilized. I'll show you one plan just to give you sort of a feel for an existing plan, and the one that we worked on most recently together. And then I'll show you a timeline, like the sequence of events that led to the culmination of the plan, and open it up for Q&A. So let's start with the why. You might like that book by Simon Sinek, Start with Why. And it's very helpful just for yourself to get motivated personally, but also as you bring others on board with planning. So just a few prompts here for you. One is, should a plan be detailed? What does no plan look like? Your community without a good strategic plan. The concept of an algorithm-like decision tool, and the concept of essentialism. So first, so let me address these quite quickly. Should a plan be detailed? And in the process of doing past strategic plans, I've looked at probably 50 plans across the country, mostly in engineering, to be honest. And they are all over the map, from 50 pages to 5 pages, to 2 pages, to paragraphs, to simply visuals, all sorts of plans. And at the end of the day, I would say the key word is not detailed. I would say it's precise. So a plan should be precise, not necessarily lengthy. And one good litmus test would be, if you read the plan and you take away the organization, can you tell that the plan belongs to your particular college? Whether it's through the mission statement or other aspects. That's a tough one, because one of the big criticisms I've had personally of other people's plans and my own planning, if I'm honest with myself, is this plan could apply to anybody. And it's sort of vanilla in its nature. So that's not good. So precision is key. What does no plan look like? Well, this is a real problem, and this is the main why. Without a plan, decisions by the dean or the director or the leadership team become highly politicized, and almost the consequence of history, who very inequitable or naturally inequitable without a plan. And also, I like to think of a strategic plan as a map with, like a North Star. And if you don't have a map, you'll just end up in some new version of where you already were. So you're guaranteed not to get anywhere. The third point is not really a question, but I really like a plan that's an algorithm for decision making. In other words, an opportunity comes to your desk. Do you say yes? Do you say no? How do you deal with it? Or a new circumstance. Let's say tuition suddenly goes haywire, or you suddenly lose staff, or you suddenly get a big gift. All of these unanticipated things, your plan needs to accommodate or adapt to unanticipated external factors. And typically a strategic plan, the ones I've seen do not do that. They're like a work plan. And the work plan is out the window as soon as, some external disruption comes along. So I'm a big advocate of algorithm-like decision tools as the design principle. And finally, essentialism. The one thing I took out of that book by Greg McGowan is strategy is a systematic way of saying no. And so that's another test of a good strategic plan is does it empower you and your leadership team to say no in a really rational way? And then you can point to the plan to say, well, we decided for the next 5 years, we're emphasizing inclusion, or we're emphasizing building the diversity of our team, or we're emphasizing ethics. And in order to do that well, we're going to say no to a whole host of other things. James, you're on mute.
Thanks, Pat. That was great. Gets us through the why. And so I'll talk a little bit about some of the theories and models that are out there. We're just going to list, 3 or 4 of my favorites that have influenced the tools that we use at Entergain. Jim Collins, we've probably all heard of Good to Great, landmark book on strategy. He also has a version of that focused on nonprofit and purpose-driven organizations. In the notes, you'll be able to get these slides, and in the notes section, there's links to all the theories that I'm referring to here. Clayton Christensen, many of you maybe know of this phrase, disruptive innovation. He coined that phrase. A lot of the major tech industry organizations that we know today started out as startups using his philosophy of coming into some unserved market. A good example in higher education are online colleges. There was a whole host of schools popping up as primarily online schools, filling a gap that community colleges, residential colleges, and universities didn't fill. And now the rest of the higher ed world is responding with various online learning. Another one, the Invincible Company, says if you're going to explore new things, do that, create a separate team, protect them, let them take risks, allow some failure there, while you at the same time stick to your knitting with other groups, exploit the things you do well, and keep those as a foundation to provide steadiness to the organization. But I'll come back around to something that's values-based, purpose-based. Strategy as a Way of Life is a great article that came out from MIT Sloan that really looks at a lot of principles from Japanese philosophy on starting with soul, start with moral purpose. It actually aligns really well with the first one, Jim Collins, which we think of as sort of the opposite of that spectrum, a business book, a business writer. But this really kind of ties it back with, a way that we want to live under morals is actually a good way to live, to run our organizations as well. All of those and many other writings out there have influenced the model we use at Entergain, which we call values-based strategic planning. And the reason we call it that is because we look at the terms that I'll go through in this pyramid, and we insist on them coming out in a very specific sequence. We look at values first. And what we mean by values are things that are constants. The reason for being, the things that you believe, a sense of what's important, and they have the longest shelf life. So your values from one strategic plan to another strategic plan many years later may actually stay very constant. That's not unusual. They could last up to 10 or 20 years in an organization. The next thing is a mission. We're very clear about what a mission is. It's present tense. It is present tense only. It is what we do for whom. How do we have an impact? That has a long shelf life also, but maybe not as long as the shelf life of values. So maybe 5 to 10 years. The next, once we know what we do today and what our values are, we can look at our aspirational values and see where there are gaps, and we can start to conduct analysis of the outside world and say, what do we want to be in the future? Is there some unmet need out there that, based on our values, we want to try to deliver on? So it's that future look, that vision, that a good leader can see this before others. Then once we have that, we can start to think about strategy. How are we going to get from our current state, what we do today, and for whom, to our vision of where we want to go as an organization? The strategy gives us the path, the formula, the algorithm, the DNA structure that says, okay, What are we going to output from this? And that is going to output goals. And this is where a lot of organizations get it wrong. They'll have very prescriptive, detailed plans. They think it's a big 50-page plan. That's better. It's not actually. That's, in our model, a goal that comes out of a strategy that has a longer shelf life. Those goals are going to have a short shelf life, 6 to 12 months. The more prescriptive, the shorter the shelf life. But you do need to get to that point. A good strategic plan will have goals that keep turning out. Now, this is a great expression. There's a great NPR article in the notes that it kind of explores with experts what is the origin of this expression, but maybe you've heard it. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And so that's another bit that we want to share that is really about the how we deliver these things. So, the pyramid, again, values, how do we get to that in the Energain model, and how did we do it at Bucknell with Pat and his colleagues? We had everybody invited to, faculty, staff, administration, students, invited through surveys and workshops. I think a lot of the comments came back that it was the first time the staff had ever been that involved in the strategic planning process. Surveys and workshops, great way to get everyone involved. Then we break people up into working groups, and they can extrapolate from that data set and that values exercise to start to build out, well, what is our mission? What do we do today? What do we not do, right? What are the trade-offs? And then from there, further working groups and experts, outside experts, start to look at peer organizations, stakeholders, trends, and try to think what's next, right? What's something that we're not doing yet that we want to do? And then from there, we can draft that strategy, that strategic plan, which then, usually that's the dean's office and a cross-section of other representatives from other stakeholder groups, kind of crafting that. And then it is something that outputs goals that can be refreshed every year during the lifespan of that strategic plan. So what does this look like? Why don't you show us how this all came out when we worked on this together at Bucknell?
All right, thanks, James. So we followed that roadmap, and that was very helpful to me. I'd seen many strategic plans, and I had done a couple myself without a roadmap. Like, what do I do first? And what James described abstractly in that pyramid is really what we followed. And so first I'll show you sort of the outcome, the plan that exists. The nice thing is that it's still being executed after I left Bucknell, which is satisfying. So again, Bucknell, it's a different organization. So is a private university with a College of Engineering of about 750 students, 75 faculty, and about 30 staff. And so the plan ended up being an algorithm. So it's in total, it can be written down on several pages. It's the mission statement that came out as a two-parter. It's got a title and then more detail. And I like that for plans because the title helps you capture things quickly in a memorable way. The mission that came out of all that work is to provide an exemplary engineering education to better the world. And I won't read this whole text, but this builds upon that in more detail. And it also, in and of itself, is helpful in saying no. Vision was going to take us a bit further in designing what new things do we do. And so that was articulated in the brief title form: to benefit our global community by cultivating technically adept, responsible citizens who positively contribute to innovative solutions in a changing world. Clearly, you can tell this is for a College of Engineering based on some of the language, but other elements of the language are more generic, I would say, applicable even to an honors college. We spent a lot of time in community coming up with our values, and this was so helpful. It's also for hiring new faculty, new staff, for recruiting students. You can use core values as a way to frame your interview questions. These are the set that came out just in title form. There's more to them when you look at the full plan. But student first approach. I think everybody on this call probably would share that as a core value. Diverse perspectives for engineering success, transformative teaching and learning, and collaborative scholarship. And this is the part that lasts 3 to 5 years, our particular goals. We had a large number and whittled it down. And this is where I had to play a role of dean of saying, let's keep it essential. And so it was hard to do, really hard to do. And I had to say goodbye to a couple goals I really loved. But these were the 4 that survived. Enhancing our engineering education experience. There were some tactics below that. Foster a diverse, inclusive, and equitable environment for all. That led to the most activity in the first couple years of the executed plan, I'll say. Champion our distinctive identity, which led to investments in communications, and fortify existing connections and cultivate new ones. So let's talk a little bit about the how, like how did this come about in time? So now that was the final product in very simplified form. But how did we take the pyramid that James was talking about, shown here on the left, and bring it to life? Well, we started with an all hands retreat. I'll show you a couple pictures of that in a moment. Fortunately, this all happened pre-COVID. So we didn't have all of the constraints that COVID has brought about, although we've learned to live with. But retreats. And then how do you organize the community? If you want to be really inclusive, it becomes a management problem. How do you manage? That was over 100 people. If you add students, literally over a few thousand total people involved. Well, you do it by sort of structure. And so we conceived of a strategic planning committee that had representatives from like students, staff, faculty, and administration. That was a pretty big group, about 12 or 13. And then 3 large working groups that were oriented around knowledge. We had many different ways to slice it, but we decided on having a working group around gaining or acquiring knowledge, applying knowledge, and advancing or creating knowledge. And they had very different ways of looking at the curriculum, the student experience, the outcomes, all of the stakeholders. And they worked on reports in smaller groups that did SWOT analyses, stakeholder interviews, whether it's alumni, incoming students, you name it. And then they made recommendations that, so it sort of blew everything up into these 3 vectors. And then they became our 4 goals. So it's like any sort of product development. You blow everything up and then you bring it down to crisp and clean sort of product launch, and then the published plan. This sequence in the middle looks really simple. Boy, was it difficult. Just because I'll be honest, 75 faculty, and I'm one of them, but that's a lot. It might be easier. If your college does not directly involve faculty, but it was difficult. It was very much a political process as I was executing this. Here's a couple pictures from the early days in 2017 as we were launching the plan. We had a couple-day retreat where this was like when the whole group was all together, but then we had lots of breakouts. And on the screen, I will mention, that's Joe Helbley, the new president of Lehigh University. He had been the dean of engineering at Dartmouth at the time, and he gave us some tips on how to do this kind of work. He was very helpful at the time. And then here's the timeline, and you'll be able to see this in the materials I gave you. At first, I'll be honest, I thought it was going to take 6 months or less. It ended up taking, in total, about a year and a half to the final form. And I don't say that to scare you. I say that just to say how it can go. One of the things that was political about doing strategic planning with a large group of faculty is our bylaws said that a supermajority needed to vote to pass the plan. And so I needed to get votes. Anyways, we started in January 17th and formed all of these committees and walked it through multiple rounds of values, and mission. That went pretty fast. I would say values, mission, and vision were done in about 3 months. What happened, as I found, is as we got into goals, people viewed that as, now you're talking about our world and I really care. And that was great. We got a lot of energy about what the goals are. What are we going to emphasize? Because that might change whether I'm relevant as a staff member, as a faculty member, and that could be scary and exciting at the same time. So in the end, it ended up passing, and again, it had to pass by vote in Bucknell's system. It took about a year and a half. And then as the plan is executed today, there's a thing called initiative launches. So we kept initiatives out of the plan, which I'm so happy we did, because it gives the thing shelf life. And then you can have events. This one was called Lunch Launch, maybe a couple months after the plan passed, where we simply got together around a couple different goals and just said, hey, what initiatives do we want to launch? And then we'll sort of throw some resources at those particular initiatives. And here's an example that came out of the plan of a global-minded engineer. And what would we do to support that with coursework or with study abroad opportunities, things like that. So that's how the plan lives on, is not with initiatives being articulated in the published plan, but rather on a periodic basis, they get born out of the plan.
Yeah, and one of the things you did really well, Pat, because I get to see a lot of leaders run these plans and use our models and use our infrastructure as a support. You to the letter made sure that there was involvement, engagement at every single phase. So, a lot of leaders, it's tempting to say, great, we did the service at the beginning, great, I'm going to go and write it myself. But you always made sure everybody's voice was in it, which took a little longer, but it made it much more powerful. People really owned it. They saw their words in it, and they're running with it, and they're running it today with even in your absence. So I really commend that approach.
It reminds me of a challenge and a role that the dean or the leadership team needs to play, is helping broker the power imbalances in inclusive planning. I'll say that again. The leader needs to broker power imbalances in planning in order for voices. I like Horton hears a who. The who could be a student that's got a brilliant idea that can get squashed like that, or an underrepresented staff member who has the idea that maybe and I found this out, I did not fully appreciate till I did strategic planning, that the power imbalances in squelching voices. Mm-hmm. And so the dean can play a really important role. And some of that is structural. So you can have small conversations and then amplify the voice, or you can just have established what I like to call a designed alliance about how meetings proceed, and people don't steal ideas or people don't squash ideas. So it's an important space, whether it's students or staff or underrepresented faculty, you name it. There's a lot of power imbalance. Now, all of this was done at Bucknell. I do want to say, Schreier, this is an honors community. We have an existing plan. It actually is chock full of great ideas. I think it hits the mark on so many fronts. It's a bit more at the top of the pyramid, and very much at the top with the tactical sort of to-do list, the things we need to do the next couple of years. It did not start with values. We have existing values. But they were conceived about 10 years ago, 11 years ago, and we want to take a look at that. So we're planning a process to reimagine it using the methodology I mentioned before, that James and I have talked about, a participative approach with staff, faculty, and students, and to draw on that current plan and merge them together. So the beauty is we have all of these initiatives already in motion from the existing plan. What I want us to achieve is sort of the structure I mentioned before and an algorithm.